Well, to discuss more on the abduction at the University of Abuja and its implications for security in the nation's capital, security expert Dr. Kabiru Adamu joins us remotely from Lagos. Good evening, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
Great. I would like to ask you about your initial reactions when you heard about this. But I also know that the governor of Niger State, sometime in June this year, raised the alarm over activities of bandits and terrorists activities in Niger State. At that time, he said they were hoisting flags 20 kilometers from the nation's capital. Does this incident today crystallize the alarm and the concerns raised by the governor of Niger State?
In a way, it does. I interpret the whole situation, to describe the boiling frog syndrome, where we are gradually in Abuja, kind of, slowly falling into the heat of the moment, where almost all around the city you have incidents of either abduction or other security challenges. Residents of Kuje and places like Tungamaji have been constantly under the attack and targeting of these criminal groups. So clearly, this development at the university, unfortunately, is an indication of the gradual deterioration of security within the Federal Capital Territory.
With what has happened now, what should government security operatives be doing about the FCT and protecting it?
The bottom line is that our approach to security should be changed, where we realize, for instance, that we've got threat elements, and those threat elements, we know where they are staying, but then we shy away from going to those places to either dislodge them or arrest them. That should stop. In this instance, we know that these gunmen hide in these ungoverned spaces that are around Abuja, and it's unfathomable that we have not yet dominated those spaces. Allowing them to continue to dominate those spaces and continue the activities means it's just a matter of time before they come into the city center. So the first thing to do is to dominate those spaces, deny them the ability to stay in those places and operate. Second point is to strengthen the administration of criminal justice. Anyone who commits any offense, and I can list the number of offenses, starting from possession of weapons that they shouldn't have, to criminality like abduction, all of this should be punished. They really need to arrest those behind it and then to punish them. Anything short of this, unfortunately, would mean a continuation of these types of incidents. And then, of course, we also need to build the resilience of communities that are affected by this. I mentioned Kuje. Kuje has for years been the receiving end of these types of activities. And frankly, these things are continuing. So we need to build their resilience and reduce the influences of these criminal groups in those locations.
And Dr. Kabiru, can I ask you, from this MO, what are we dealing with? Are they bandits? Are they the Boko Haram terrorists? And is this a deliberate attack on education? Is it because they are soft and sitting targets? Do they grab the best of headlines and make primetime news like we're discussing at the moment? What exactly is going on? And why are learning institutions increasingly becoming the target?
I would start from your last question. Learning institutions are soft targets. The benefits of abduction, especially when you target learning institutions, you have several persons converged in one place with very low security. In the case of the attack in Giri, securities that were unarmed. So it was very easy for these persons. We're told they came about 50 of them to overcome whatever resistance these security guards had. And then, of course, after they had overcome them, to go ahead and abduct the persons that they abducted. What also became very clear to me is that there was no, procedures, as it were, for the residents to respond when this kind of activities take place. So clearly it was a soft target with high benefits. They were able to take certain number of persons, and the likelihood that ransom will be paid is extremely high. So low risk and high benefit is what we're facing. Now, until we know who is behind the attack, it will be difficult to reach conclusions regarding the motive. My first sort of conclusion would be it's criminal. Their intention is just to get money, and then they would release their victims. But there are other possibilities. For instance, it could be terroristic, it could be ideological. All of this, unfortunately, we won't know until the perpetrators are either arrested and they are debriefed. But for now, I would remain with the criminal motive.
Oh, all right, Kabiru, you said shy away and not dominate the spaces where these people occupy. You said they know them. What will be the reason why the security operatives or the government are shying away from them? And then you talked about building the resilience of these communities. How do we do that? And then earlier guest talked about building a special security whatever for the institutions in the country. Can we do that, seeing that they constantly face these attacks?
Number one is to engage them on community, security measures. So either use them to generate intelligence, and it's very easy, make available means of communication to them. And once you make available those means of communication, designate key persons within the community that would have responsibility for that type of communication. In the past, it would be the traditional rulers, where if you are a member of that community and you pick up, because believe me, there's always intelligence ahead of these types of attacks. So once any member of that community is aware of that, and then he reports it to the designated person, like I said, most likely traditional ruler, then accountability would follow, which means there should be the security agencies that have capacity for rapid response. And without accountability, there is no level of resilience within the community that will be meaningful. So the government needs to hold the various security agencies. I keep on saying we have 27 ministries, departments, and agencies that are responsible for security. Now, a couple of them should have that capacity for responding to this type of communities when they call on them in these types of distress situations. And then, of course, where that fails, the National Assembly needs to step in and ask critical questions of that. So it's an all of government sort of situation where the level of accountability needs to be higher than what we're seeing at the moment. Somebody dropped the ball in this instance, and that person should be asked critical questions. How come you left such a critical institution like a university with lecturers that have spent years reading and are contributing to society without any level of protection? And then, of course, once those questions are asked, hopefully this type of incidents would not repeat itself. Another level is actually the role of civil society organizations in terms of early warning systems that will be deployed in those locations. And once those early warning systems are active, then those early warning systems can generate these types of intelligence. Whenever there are pending attacks, they can be highlighted, the media will pick it up, and that has a way of forcing government, as it were, to respond. So one of these two of methods hopefully would help the community in terms of their resilience building capacities. Like I said, the case of Kuje has been happening for years, and yet we are not seeing any meaningful sort of action to reduce the consequences of the targeting of Kuje and its residents. A lot of business activities in Kuje have been grounded as a result of this. People have relocated from Kuje, and unfortunately, it's still happening.
All right, then tackle the issue of shying away, the authorities shying away. Why are they not dominating the spaces? You said they know the places. I mean, that befuddles the mind. It's expect that if they do indeed know the spaces they occupy, they should be able to dominate. So what is the reason?
I think it's a combination of two elements. First of all, the weakness of the security architecture. There is a gap in the security architecture. I think there is a department in the Ministry of Environment, the Forest Rangers, I think. And recently, one of your correspondents, I think Leila, actually did a beautiful report on the activities of that particular department. So I think they have responsibility for our parks, our reserves, our forests. But do they have enough numbers? Do they have enough equipment? Are they, well, the budget that they are allocated, is it enough for them to carry out their responsibilities? Unfortunately, I do not think so. So there is a gap within our national security architecture that is not addressing this gray area where we have ungoverned spaces that are supposed to be manned by these rangers. I think it's very important and absolutely necessary that we look at that gap and then to block it. The second point is the lack of cohesion within the various agencies within the national security architecture. Each of them kind of is operating in silos and in certain instances without the kind of cooperation that is necessary to dominate these types of spaces. The third argument could be lack of capacity as well, where you are dealing with armed non-state actors that have more weapons than these members of these 27 ministries, departments, and agencies. And so they are, I don't want to use the word afraid, but they do not have the capability or capacity to go into those ungoverned spaces to dislodge them. So clearly, there is a need to revise that or block that gap within our national security architecture. There is no part of the country that you go to that these ungoverned spaces are not a source or a haven for one or the other form of threat within that location. And I think it's high time within our national development that we seek ways to block that gap. And the simplest way to do that is to increase the capacity of the relevant agencies that have responsibility for the forest. And I think the Rangers are the best in this regard. Perhaps we could also have a tactical unit within either the military or the police that would have responsibility. Currently, we do not have that at the moment.
As always, thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, security expert, for being on Newsnight.